Welcome to France 2022, the campaign, our weekly show covering the presidential election.
Welcome to you as well, Mark, and welcome to everyone. France 2022, of course, brings you analysis, insights, and reports from the campaign trail.
Yes, and Tom, we're less than 1 month away from round one of the presidential election, a very unusual election under the shadow of the pandemic, under the shadow of the war. And as we speak, a special primetime program is getting underway with all the main candidates. They will not talk about housing, not talk about education. They will mostly talk about the war in Ukraine. Let's have a look at the recap of this week in this very unusual campaign with Shirley Sitbon.
Emmanuel Macron, the president, who's now also officially a candidate, was heading a crucial war summit to end the violence in Ukraine, which means he was a no-show in his own first rally. The government spokesperson and the interior minister held the fort.
Il faut convaincre avec humilité que nous avons, je crois, le meilleur bilan et que le président de la République est celui qui est le mieux placé pour diriger la France dans le contexte que nous connaissons. Mais il faut convaincre avec le candidat et parfois sans lui.
Since the war and sanctions have pushed energy prices up, the cost of living has become even more of a priority for voters. The government said it will reduce some fuel taxes. For Macron's rivals, this is far from enough.
Je persiste à dire qu'il faut baisser de manière pérenne la TVA sur l'énergie de manière générale.
Je propose que l'on supprime provisoirement la TVA sur le carburant.
Moi, je souhaite que le gouvernement s'engage à rendre tous les surplus de recettes fiscales qu'il a aux Français sur l'essence.
Nathalie Arthaud said rising prices are all due to oil companies trying to maximize benefits.
L'essence qu'il y a dans la cuve de la station-service, elle n'a pas été payée au prix du baril d'il y a 2 heures. Ça s'appelle de la spéculation.
Mesdames et messieurs, Fabien Roussel!
He looks like he's on top of the world, but Fabien Roussel is going through a rough patch. The communist candidate is being investigated for a fake job he allegedly had years back.
Je savais bien qu'en suscitant une certaine sympathie et même une dynamique autour de la campagne que je porte, qu'il y aurait une partie de balle-trappe qui serait ouverte, les coups tombent. Mais je vous le dis, rien ne me détournera de cette campagne.
While the communist got a kick in the head, Éric Zemmour got hit in the head with an egg. This week, he has had to admit his key measures of forcing illegal migrants out and banning all immigration were not realistic. Valérie Pécresse has been sliding in the polls. She visited the home region of late President Chirac, hoping it would breathe new life into her campaign. That's all from the campaign trail. Until we meet again.
Okay, let's take a look and see how everyone is doing in the polls. A new survey came out on Saturday, published by Ipsos. What did it show us?
Well, it shows that things are pretty stable. Emmanuel Macron, who is now officially in the race, is slightly above, I should say, 30%. He has a healthy advantage over Marine Le Pen, 16%. And she is now slightly ahead. She was neck and neck with the other contenders. She's now slightly ahead of Éric Zemmour, also a candidate from the far right, 13.5%. Then comes the far left leader, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the only one on the left over 10%. He's now 12%. And the conservative candidate, as we just saw in Shirley's report, Valérie Pécresse, has been sliding. She's at 11%. All of them are hoping to be in the second round. And if we look now at the second round, clearly win for Emmanuel Macron, 60 versus 40% for Marine Le Pen. In 2017, they faced off in round 2, and Emmanuel Macron got some, if I'm correct, 66% of the votes versus 34%. So Emmanuel Macron is now clearly in the best position he can be, but things can change, obviously, very quickly.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's what the first and second rounds would look like.
Yes.
Climate activists did think that global warming was going to be one of the central issues on the campaign trail. But of course, as we were saying earlier, the war in Ukraine has totally eclipsed that particular issue and others.
Yes, people thought that this would be a key issue. And on Saturday, tens of thousands of people took to the streets to call for more attention to the climate emergency. Some candidates joined them, hoping to convince voters that they would be the best choice for the environment. Maya Anaïs, yet again, has the story for us.
The clock is ticking towards election day, but also for planet Earth. Thousands of protesters have sent a wake-up call to the presidential candidates, asking them to look up and make protecting the planet a priority. The climate crisis has been eclipsed by the war in Ukraine, with less than 2% of talking points in media coverage of the election campaign.
On n'en parle plus du tout, je regarde même plus les infos, j'en ai tellement marre.
Le débat politique, il n'est pas du tout centré sur ce qu'il y a d'essentiel, en tout cas sur ce qui est possible d'anticiper.
Ça devient de plus en plus urgent et on a l'impression que même des faits scientifiques, ça fait pas bouger grand monde.
Several left-wing candidates have attended the protest, like Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who advocates for ecological planning.
Regardez dans les programmes ce qui leur paraît être à la hauteur des circonstances. Vous voyez, je suis sympa, je ne dis pas que c'est Yac le mien qui répond, ce qui est pourtant la vérité.
The ecologist Yannick Jadot has also braved the drizzle. If elected, he wants to follow a whatever-it-takes climate strategy to get rid of nuclear energy and to end France's dependency on fossil fuels.
Avec toutes les complaisances politiques que ça a généré, ça tue la démocratie, on le voit. En Ukraine, ça tue les gens, mais ça tue aussi le climat.
Meanwhile, Anne Hidalgo criticized Macron's track record.
Nous sommes gouvernés depuis 5 ans par un président qui a tourné le dos à la question du climat, qui a considéré que ce n'était pas un sujet, qui d'ailleurs a été condamné dans son propre pays par une des plus hautes juridictions, le Conseil d'État, pour son inaction climatique.
Global warming is a top priority for 94% of French people, with youngsters at the forefront of change.
Okay, well, we're joined here in the studio by Yuka Roya from the business desk. Hi there, Yuka.
Hi, Tom.
Now, of course, business always at the forefront of people's minds in an election, and the impact of the war on daily lives has got a business angle, of course, a cost of living angle.
That's right. Well, the cost of living is indeed a central issue in. Even if there wasn't a war, it would have been a central issue in the presidential campaign. Well, now, if you look back on the yellow vests and other various other protests that have taken place since President Macron took office, the rising cost of living has really been always a key complaint. Now, the ongoing surge in energy prices started before Russia invaded Ukraine. For fuel, prices have increased 16% and for diesel, 13% here in France. Now, the government has taken measures to limit the impact on consumers. It has placed the price cap on rises in electricity and gas bills for households. And this weekend, the government announced another plan. This time, it's a direct payback scheme for motorists of 15 cents for every litre that they spend at the pump. This scheme coming into effect on April the 1st and will go on for 4 months. Now, President Macron says that the price caps should be extended if needed. He said that as a candidate, while other candidates have put forward ideas such as reducing VAT on fuel from the current 20% to 5.5% in line with essential foods. One far-left candidate, Nathalie Arthaud, is even calling for scrapping VAT altogether. So it's an extreme idea, but obviously it's a sensitive political issue as well because the state depends on tax revenues from these things. Now, others have also said that, well, at least a VAT on fuel should be VAT should be removed from essential foods and energy. Now, let's hear from French motorists to hear what they have to say about this latest government help measure.
C'est un bon début, mais ça sera jamais assez.
Non, c'est pas suffisant, surtout avec les petits salaires qu'on a.
Ça redescend, ça rassure un petit peu. Voilà. On espère que ça va continuer à descendre un peu et pour que ça soit plus vivable.
La semaine dernière, c'était plus de 2 € le litre, 2,20 € je crois. Là, ça va un peu mieux.
Il y a une petite baisse, mais franchement, on le sent quand même.
Well, large energy companies have, as such, become targets, with several candidates asking to make them pay more because they will win big with the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, they've kind of become obvious targets. The government has already shocked EDF, the Électricité de France, when it made a pledge to put a 4% cap on the rise in electricity bills for ordinary households this year and make the state power supplier take an 8.4 billion financial hit to make up for that shortfall. Now, some candidates are calling for taking further steps targeting big energy firms that are set to make a profit, as they say, out of rising prices with a special wartime tax. Now, the idea has also come from groups like the International Energy Agency, which released earlier this month a 10-point proposal on how Europe can wean off Russian energy, oil and gas. And as part of that plan, IEA supported the idea of a temporary tax on profits made by energy giants. And candidates like far-right Marine Le Pen seized on that idea very quickly. Last week, she proposed taxing oil companies, labeling them profit takers of the war. She said that this could help finance a reduction in fuel prices for ordinary French consumers. And as she, of course, also accused President Macron of making France economically reliant on Russia.
Thank you very much, Yuka, for this very important issue that will certainly keep center stage in the presidential election.
Indeed. Thank you, Yuka. Well, in the lead up to the presidential vote, we're taking the pulse of the country. France 24's journalists Julie Dungoloff and Florence Villeminot have been crisscrossing France, meeting voters to try to understand their daily lives, their concerns, and as you'll see, also some of their ideas for the future of the country.
Yes, and this week we're heading to the center of France to meet with a traveling barman by the name of Sébastien Cherrier. He's on a mission to bring life back to small villages where shops have been closing one after the other.
I grew up here in the Berry region. I've always lived here. Back in the day, I remember how lively the villages were around here. There were bistros, small shops and bakeries. Real life. To see it all closed up, that drove me crazy. That's how I got the idea of creating a bistro, but on wheels. We just got to Saint-Léger-le-Petit. I come every 2 weeks.
Life isn't that bad in Saint-Léger. It's a wonderful place. It's a way to get together and chat a bit, joke around, because that's all that matters.
My name's Aurélie Garneau, and I'm the mayor of Saint-Léger-le-Petit. What we're missing in our town is a bar that would be open all the time. The last one closed 6 years ago. And a little grocery store where people can buy bread. It's true that going to the bakery is a way for people to socialize.
Since the 2000s, there have been a lot of problems, starting with the euro. The euro really did a lot of damage. It ruined small businesses, and then a lot of big superstores started opening up, and people go to what's cheapest. You said 3 Kiers, a Berrichon and a beer? That'll be $9.50. I realize that the barman is also the town psychologist. People need to talk. It's often the older people who set the mood more than the younger people. What affects me the most is when an older person comes up to me and says, "Kid, it's really good what you've done. It's a simple idea, but you had to think of it." If I were president, my priority would be to bring life back to all the small villages. Open up small businesses, butchers, bakeries, pharmacies, schools. My big priority would be small villages. Secondly, I would stop taxing small businesses. That way they could keep going and hire people.
Okay, let's finish on a lighter note by talking about eggs and flour.
Yes, it seems the French enjoy aiming at their politicians with, well, we're in France after all, food. Éric Zemmour, who was until recently a pundit, earned his stripes this week.
Visé par un œuf,
elle ironise.
Ça fait presque partie des traditions.
Une femme fait irruption sur l'estrade. Très calme, François Hollande dépoussière ses dossiers avant d'être évacué. Protection de haute personnalité et des agents de sécurité.
Fillon, à son arrivée, le candidat des Républicains, vous le voyez, a été aspergé.
François Bayrou, le candidat EDF, a été entarté. Apparemment des étudiants qui lui reprochent d'avoir donné une claque à un jeune garçon.
Franchement, si en France on en est là, alors c'est qu'il y a du boulot à faire dans la société française.
Yes, a strange tradition, but people seem to enjoy it. And that's it for our 6th edition of France 2022, The Campaign. Join us next Monday at 8:15 Paris time. This will be the beginning of this show, but on a daily basis. See you next week.